Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast. And today, Dakota and myself have a guest. His name is Jorge Hernandez, aka. How many names do you have, Jorge? You do it. You introduce yourself.
Jorge Hernandez, aka Wonder Boy, aka the Boy J, aka. That was it. That was it too.
That was gonna be like a Game of Thrones thing where we're like sitting through 20 titles.
And today we're going to be reviewing Edward James Olmos's 1992 American Me. And before we get started, though, Jorge, let the people know where they can find you, what you've been up to, okay. Any music you've been doing lately, all that good stuff.
All right, for sure. You can find all my stuff gathered on theboyj.com. That is THEBOY, the letter J.com. And right there, you can find all my links, all my socials. I recently released a song called Self-Care. It released earlier this month. It's my first track released of 2021. And if you guys want to check it out, it'll be on theboyj.com as well.
And make sure to check out the Drop Off podcast.
Make sure to check out the Drop Off podcast.
So American Me was made in 1992. It basically chronicles they change a lot of the names, but I'm pretty sure it's essentially a true story, right? But they do change some of the names to protect some of the basically
it didn't work out from what I understand. Like 10 people got murdered for this film or something. So now I'm a little nervous. I don't exactly want to get my head sawed off. I was looking on YouTube. There's like 3 other people that have reviewed this movie. I'm like, okay, so yeah.
Just to clarify, I was looking that up as well, and I believe Danny Trejo mentioned that, or believes that there's at least like 10 or maybe 12 consultants for the film that ended up getting basically killed by the Mexican mafia.
It went even deeper. Like Ejo himself had like a hit out on him and shit. So I don't know. I had no idea. I watched this movie years ago. I didn't even know it was like a true story or anything. So just learned that like yesterday. I'm like, oh, okay.
So the film begins with like this, with the opening credits begin with basically the sound of the people getting processed into prison, having a cough, stripped naked, all that stuff.
It's all just audio, but it's really graphic. The dialogue. Lift your nutsack. Spread your ass. It's just right off the bat. It's you're in for something. I mean, I guess it's
right. And the voiceover comes in, and most of the voiceover, I believe, is meant to be through letters sent between Montoya Santana and his wife, I believe maybe girlfriend.
Well, not his wife.
Right, his girlfriend and his brother and his, I think maybe at some point
his mom.
Like his mom. Yeah. I don't love all of the voiceover in this movie, but the early stuff is really good. But voiceover is just hard to crack for anybody, really.
I thought it was. I mean, because we don't even meet the girlfriend till much later in the film. I mean, for one thing, so it's, you don't know who he's addressing, and then once that becomes clear, it's, by that point he's already kind of like almost doomed. So I thought there was almost like a poetry to it. I mean, I like that. But that's all right. I mean, I know a lot of people are against voiceover. I think it's all in how you do it, but I kind of thought it was well executed.
I think it was definitely better than Blade Runner's voiceover.
Oh, but... Jesus. No, I mean, a lot of it resonated with me. The idea of, this sort of duality, that there's, I remember, that was like the one line I remembered from years ago when I first watched it was, there's one of you who loves and one of you who kills. And I mean, the whole movie is kind of exploring that dual nature, I guess, at least towards the end, it becomes a lot more. So, but I don't know. I liked it, but no, if you didn't, I don't know.
Oh, I like that's my favorite part of the voiceover, but I do like that they bring in his girlfriend's voiceover, because that lets you know that right away. Because for a long time in this movie, it's like just some really heavy shit, and you don't know like how worth, like, just like, if there's any good in any of these characters, right? But the fact that he has someone that loves him, like his girlfriend, and that's established in the first scene, gives you some investment in the movie right away.
We also, I mean, we don't even know who he's writing to. We just know that there's somebody, and then that becomes apparent later on who it is. So,
kind of with that, it gives off that very early gangster movies, kind of like that Godfather, that Scarface. It kind of comes off that way in the beginning, like these are like films, and like it's gonna build up to like a story, like nowadays, a lot of newer films is mostly like mystery, action, mystery kind of solved, action, mystery solved at the end kind of thing. And like this one is kind of based on a true story. Like it's depicting a character. Some things have been altered to create a better, maybe theatrical version, possibly. But for the most part, it was a very I think it was a very well put story that Olmos did by picking these certain scenes and making this the final edit, and now it's like the film. But the voiceover, rewatching it again, paying attention to stuff like that, like I agree, like the beginning of it was well done, and then as the film progressed, you kind of saw a little bit of not my favorite voiceover, but it was definitely this character was changing, and so were the thoughts. The voiceover was
the letters were changing.
Yep.
And then by the time the third act comes around, there's, I believe, almost no more voiceover, because when he gets out of prison, that's when
present time.
That's when the letters stop. It's present time, and there's no voiceover. And maybe I just feel that way because I think that part is the best part of the movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not inconsistent though. Yeah, the voiceovers disappear because he's out of prison, but then maybe we're getting ahead. But I mean, he ultimately goes back to prison. It's revealed, who these letters were to and what it was about. And by that point, I mean, you already kind of know, but there's just sort of this tragic element to it because you realize by that stage in the film he's pretty doomed, and so. Yeah, actually, I mean, of the whole movie, though, like to me, the voiceover stuff is what stood out in my memory. So I don't, I guess for that, like I wouldn't say it's bad. It's rare I remember a voiceover, but it's really the voiceover elements I remembered years on. So, yeah, I don't think, like I said, I don't think voiceover is inherently bad. I think Blade Runner is a horrible fucking decision. Absolutely, I think a lot
that was producer motivated and everything. And Edward James Olmos is in Blade Runner too, just by the way.
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
But yeah, and then the next scene like basically kicks off of some backstory of where his parents came from, kind of what went down there. And the Zoot Suit riots happened during that time.
That's what like. See, I don't know the history.
Yeah, I didn't know the history of it either until I watched it, because this is the first time me watching the film. But basically I Googled it, and it's like a real thing and the pictures of it look very similar to what was done in the movie. So it was kind of like a creative license reenactment, sort of, almost.
But so what, just a bunch of drunken Navy sailors came home and started tearing shit up, or like what?
Pretty much just beat up, Mexican people for no good reason, and then there was like just riots involved, and I don't know, just a shit show, basically.
Well, which is what we see in the movie, so that much I gathered. It was a shit show, whatever the fuck happened.
And Montoya and JD and Mundo are like young characters at this point. They're just kids. They're like 16. They basically join up in the gang, in the mafia, and they're really just trying to prove something, but because they're like young, and I mean, they don't know shit. They're just trying to be somebody, basically. And right away they get into trouble with running away from a gang, they have to break into a bar or a restaurant or whatever that place was. They had a jukebox, and then JD gets shot, and Montoya gets thrown in juvie. JD and Mondo go in. Yeah, they all go into juvie basically. It's like an effective early scene just to really put in place the themes right away that are like striving for respect can like screw you over a lot of the time. Like,
Well, yeah,
you can make a mistake about it.
I mean, the store owner, like, I mean, I think he was, Mexican as well. So they're breaking in. He's trying to protect his property. You can see, early on the cycle is kind of established, and they're running away from the other gang or whatever. And so they have to break into the store, and the guy comes down with the shotgun. Yeah, I mean, it's all very cyclical. I mean, I think that is apparent by the end of the movie.
Well, I was watching with my wife, who doesn't really have a lot of background with like gangs or things of that nature. This kind of film was a lot of like, oh, why are they doing that? Why are they doing this? And then like as a viewer, you kind of like have to think as well, like, okay, well, these kids essentially have nothing, don't get a lot of options. They're just walking around doing what kids with no opportunities do, maybe trying to find respect or power in a certain way. So this is what they know, and this is what is known to them as far as for the place where they come from. Because if we note in the beginning as well, Montoya's parents, they both have that gang tattoo on the inside of their hand. So it's like, oh, so this has been happening since before they were born. So now it's like they're just another chapter, and they're just doing what was done before them. And it's like just an interesting depiction of, as Dakota was saying, like just a cycle. It became a cycle of like, okay, this is starting it off, and now they're taking their first step into like falling down this path.
I think we skipped a huge part, and that's that the mother was raped at the start of the film. And the other idea that's kind of raised early on is the idea of family and everything. And so he doesn't really have a family at home. His dad's kind of rejected him. But as far as why they do what they do, I mean, just mattering. When you feel like you don't, and I don't know. I mean, like they're taking risks because why the hell not? I mean, it's unfortunate the way it ended up, obviously. And then in hindsight, you're like, but you get it, where it's like, I don't know.
So basically, they all get thrown into juvie. JD takes a little bit to get to juvie because his leg is healing up and they're fixing that shit. But like just night one, and that's like the even more fucked up part of this, is just like the very first night, Montoya gets raped by this like creepy juvie kid, and then just out of retaliation, Montoya kills the kid.
Which, I mean, you're fucking rooting for, because normally,
you're
like
rooting
in these kinds
for
of movies, like that whole thing drags itself out over a long period of time. As soon as that kid turns his back, he goes for the knife, fucking impales. And you're like all the other kids in the room. You're like, yeah, fucking kill the fucker, like so.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of the wrongs that Montoya does in this movie are like for respect, for the sake of respect. But like in that case, it's like kind of self-defense to a certain degree at some point. Like, I mean, you would have to be like an angel not to retaliate, you know what I mean? And like,
well,
lose
not
your mind
everybody's in
over
a
that.
position to retaliate, but I mean, that's the first thing that's apparent, is that he is, as soon as the knife is off his neck, and clearly he knows that this is going to go on if he doesn't put an end to it right there and then, so and normally in these movies we see that, it's dragged out over a long period of time till something happens, but like Shawshank or whatever, but right here he just puts a fucking end to that shit, like right at the start.
And you can tell it's going to go on as an audience because like you said, the kids next to the bed, like obviously like look like they get it all the time.
Yeah, it's fucked up because some of them were like really young and shit, so it's like,
so they're just, like you said, they're just rooting it on too. And when you're put in like those places in juvie, like sometimes like there is no easy way to just like be like, hey, he's raping us every night. Like they don't like, I don't know. I I feel like the enforcement of the guards like wouldn't do that much shit, or even if they did talk about it, like they'd be too prideful to talk about it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
they
sure. I
they
mean,
wouldn't go for help. So they're with the with their with the mindset in place, like there is no easy way out of that situation.
well, and the one thing it does really early on is it does get the audience on this character's side, because I mean you're cheering them on in that scene. So
just to clarify too, the Montoya's mother in 1943, I believe it was, she was raped by sailors, and Montoya was 16 in like 1959.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to juvie around sometime between 1959 and 1960. So obviously there was different times back then. So that's how there we're getting into all this other essentially shit that just wouldn't fly in today's date of like shit that happens in prison. Like, you know, we hear about violence and the way prisoners treat each other, but just to clarify, this is juvie, and it was like during the early 60s or late 50s that these characters are 16 and in juvie, because leading up to the point from the beginning of the movie to the time he's in juvie, it's a fairly short time in the film. It's maybe like the first 20 to 30 minutes, maybe if that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, during this time, you essentially travel 16 plus years, and yeah, I just wanted to clarify that part.
oh yeah, no, I mean essentially his whole life has been spent in the system, which is, you know, yeah, he hasn't really been born yet, which it comes, it's weird. It comes up in kind of like I'd say like the last third of the film, where you start to become more cognizant of that fact that like he hasn't ever actually known anything else. So but yeah, that's important, yeah, to establish that, yeah, I mean he is just a kid, and then he's really never out of there past that point, because he does kill the kid, and so that's, as soon as you're out of juvie, then you get transferred to prison, you know, for something like that. So yeah, he just hasn't even had a life at this point. So.
Yeah,
correct. Yeah.
And he got transferred to Folsom Prison, which is a very famous prison in California. Johnny Cash writes songs about it. You know, it's a heavy like gang like prison where like everyone is separated basically by gangs of race and everything like that. And it's like it's just hard in there, and like, but he establishes in the voiceover that the Mexican mafia, they had control of the drug distribution throughout the prison.
Something that's kind of a little jarring is that we don't really see Montoya's or Santana's climb to the top. We can just kind of assume that he learned his first lesson there in juvie, which is kill anybody that fucks with you, and somehow he's established himself at the top by the time we see him in prison. And things are already pretty well established at that point. I mean, he's running the show. So it might be a little jarring, but and then it's really just the Aryans and the blacks, and we don't actually really see any of the Aryans, though they're brought up. And then yes, it's really
they come into play a little later on, but
after he actually gets out of jail is when they become most relevant.
Yeah.
So
maybe I don't know if there was, Jorge, do you know if was this based off of a book?
American, I don't think so. I think it was just based off of the individual who Santana is portraying.
Right.
So I think it's based off of verbal accounts.
Because maybe there are some details about his actual coming up in that prison, like mafia sort of hierarchy, that like they didn't feel like they wanted to get out or whatever. So
it's not too much of a leap. I mean, because we've seen that he's learned that killing people works, right? So like, you know, right. And that's how we see he runs things. So, you know, yeah, it's not hard to imagine how he came to power.
Yeah, and his mother brings him a necklace in like the visitor center, and his brother is still like just a little kid at this point. and his brother's tale is one of the more tragic ones, I think.
Yeah,
It really is.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah, that one's like one of the rougher ones. And then we also have like this like kind of fucked up but sort of like cool scene where like we see how they get the drugs in prison.
Yeah.
So basically they get like one of their girlfriends to sneak it in through the toilet. And then they flush it and they have someone down at the plumbing trying to like time it and catch it, which sounds like a bad job.
No, well, we see that
you got to do what you got to do.
There are a lot of false positives before. So,
I had to say something about that too, because he essentially gets it from the sewage drain,
right,
and then just feels it, and then just wipes it off with a little like.
Well, he doesn't even really wipe it off. He just goes for the gel, the jelly.
Yeah, and you see him you see him to essentially just sticks it up where, like if you had no pockets, use this as a last resort. Later in the cell,
it's seen multiple orifices is what we're seeing.
Yes.
And then like they're passing it through like cell to cell. And one of the guys, and he's a black dude, so like that comes into play in like just a second here. Yeah. Like takes more of it than, or just all of it. It was hard to see, but like
we see the first guy gets some finger licking in, which is so fucking gross when you see the life cycle of this package.
Yeah.
Well, he tried to replace it with something, I think, or I don't know, but basically that dude,
he's just being a dumbass. Like he just thinks nobody will notice, and it's very clear that he's like, yeah. I mean, I think he's trying to act like the guard is there and will note, that's why it's taking so long. But nobody's buying that shit. So yeah.
And then the Mexican mafia sets him on fire for it because it wasn't his.
Yeah.
And that starts where the black gang in the prison. Like they almost, and this is like one of my, like, I think like visually one of the cooler scenes where you see like just all the like clothes and garbage and just shit falling from the sky. And then they have like their kind of standoff between the Mexican and the black gangs where they basically explain like it wasn't his stash and blah, blah, blah. And like, you didn't have to do them like that. And, both sides to it.
But Santana asserts there that it wasn't a racial thing. It was this guy who fucked over, somebody, and we have to maintain order, So
got to maintain respect,
right?
And that's consistent throughout. Is it never, at least in his mind, it's never like a racial thing when that kind of stuff goes down. It's just kind of how the gangs divide themselves in his mind, I believe, but.
Right, but we see he's bridging a lot of those sort of allegiances throughout the Mexicans coordinating with like the Aryans. I mean, it's just,
I mean, one of his best friends is white too. Like they also use JD to kind of finesse some just shit with the Aryan Brotherhood too, and that also plays in later because
But another thing in that scene is that he tucks some of the guards away during those looks like it's going to break out into a riot. It ultimately doesn't. It de-escalates because the guards are up there with guns, and the guy from like the black gang or whatever, he's like, I'm not going up against the guns. But he protects some of the guards by locking them in a cell, because so it's clear that he doesn't want those dudes dead because they're on his side, and they're dead, and he's going to have to reestablish the whole. It gets across that he's running the show completely, I mean, the guards are in his pocket and he protects them, they protect him, it's.
And as far as that too, like before the Mexican mafia, which they called the La M, which was what they referred to, I believe he said that before that there was nothing. And then the oldest gang, the Mexican mafia, is what controlled Folsom. So what I'm assuming not only is happening besides drug distribution, they also mentioned like you could get anything you want on the outside. We got it to you in the inside. So that involved like protection, prostitution, drugs, a bunch of shit, extortion, yada yada yada. And they're essentially creating like this. They're protecting everyone through this like violent way of like,
Well,
okay,
yeah, they're creating order, but everybody has to go along with that. Like if you break the rules, then you get burned, literally in the case of the black guy, So it's still, yeah, very, very violent system. But if you play play ball, then you're okay, So
Yep. And then after that standoff, Montoya gets thrown into solitary, and he's still running shit from solitary. So like that just shows you just how deep it goes, where, in like most prison movies that you see, like whenever someone goes into solitary, they don't do shit. Like
I watched a movie. It came out obviously long after this, but with Nikolai Coster-Waldau, Jamie Lannister.
Yeah,
it's called Shot Caller. It came out on like DirecTV or whatever. It was actually pretty good. But he's running the whole show ultimately from solitary. Well, actually, no, there's another guy running it from solitary, so he's like inaccessible. It's kind of the beauty of it. And so he goes through this whole process just to get to this guy that's running the show over the course of that movie, and it's a really bleak, fucking ugly. But he's running things not just on the inside, on the outside as well. But this did that story obviously way before, like 15 years at least. So before Shot Caller, but it's another. It had John Berthenol, I think is how you say his name, and it is a pretty good. It's good. It's another bleak, depressing prison movie. If you feel, that's almost redundant. I don't think there are any happy prison. But Shawshank's like, or
is Chicago a happy prison movie? But yeah, so it just goes to show you like just how hard to comprehend like the amount of power that they have, even just as prisoners. And then there comes a scene where this one, I forgot exactly why he got killed, but like it was in the courtyard where they're lifting weights, they're tattooing this guy that's bench pressing. Yep. And then that guy ends up getting shanked. I forgot the exact reason why. So
I think he was advocating for a more cautionary approach, and so people started to think of him as weak, and word started to spread. I think was how that went about. So it wasn't that he was even wrong. It's just that the outward appearance was something they couldn't abide, and so they had to get rid of him because they couldn't appear weak. I think is how that went.
So that scene, there was the Mexican mafia. The prison is essentially divided between races, and each race has its own gang. What was happening was that Montoya's gang was a lot of the prison inmates from the lower South California. And then there was a new gang of Mexicans that were calling themselves the family, or our family essentially. And they were from the North California, which pissed them off because it's like, oh, we spent our whole lives trying to get this together just to have someone else try to start some other shit. And when they mentioned that, some guy was like, oh, I've met that person before. He's a really cool dude. And then Montoya said, oh, perfect. Then you get his ticket. Like, you get to kill him.
Right.
He's like, no, I can't. He was like a really cool dude or something like that. And he's like, all right, don't worry about it. And like taps him on the shoulder. They got the Japanese dude to do a favor to like, oh, get this dude because he's definitely not 100% down with us. And then I think Montoya says in the voiceover, I didn't like killing our own, but the respect it got us was above anything he's ever seen. So like they were the only gang to start killing each other off if they fucked up.
But then he said that created, problems later down the road that that comes into play. So
that actually bites him in the ass,
right
at the end.
So
and that was one of the more like memorable scenes to me, because like you just see every member from every gang, like even like allied with him or whatnot, just walking by, because like nobody.
Well, I think they just don't want to be blamed for it.
Right. They don't want to be blamed for it, but that's kind of like the nature of things, where it's like you fucked up, like you get left behind, you know what I mean? Like there's no sympathy, there's no, you know what I mean? It's just, you played the game and you lost, basically.
What do you guys think of the film, like the picture itself? Because it was released in 92, so
it didn't stand out to me as like dated. I mean, it's still there's obviously a different look that things have now because they're all digital and everything, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was like timeless in a sense. I mean, but I mean, I think really the only thing that, I mean, yeah, if you go a little further back, and that thing seemed time stamped, and then in the early 2000s when they just first started to use digital, things look a little rough. The visual quality is not quite there, but yeah, this is shot more traditionally. I mean, it looks good. It holds up, I think, today.
I think the best looking scenes might be, and it's just by the nature of the story, so it's got nothing to do with anything they're doing or not doing, but like I think the best looking scenes to me are always like the scenes when they're out and where they're like where they're dancing or doing whatever, and you have like some beautiful like nighttime like lighting and that kind of stuff, because I mean this was the case with like Oz too, is it sometimes gets visually draining to see like all right, well, blue shirts, gray walls, blue shirts, gray, but that's the nature of the movie. So
right,
like,
so
it looks very good just anyway, but like when they can get into their own a little bit on the outside, I think that's when the film looks.
Well, yeah, I suppose you're right. It's the only chance that the movie even has to shine, because just by nature of being a prison movie, you can't have bright, pretty colors and really show yourself off. But as far as making it as bleak and dour and depressing as possible, I mean, it does a great job. But yeah, I mean, yeah, this was Edward James Olmos's, I think, directorial debut. But I don't think he ever directed anything after this. Possibly, if you're having hits put out on you, that might be a deterrent, to directing again. But yeah, I was gonna say, another recommendation, I guess, would just be like Battlestar Galactica, because he's throughout that whole show, it's a masterpiece. It's nothing like this, but but he really gets to act. I mean, for 4 solid seasons, and he's the heart of that whole show. But in the world of television, obviously Oz would be the closest thing. And then I started thinking about like the 90s. I don't know what the obsession was with prison movies, because we did Alien 3 and it's just
Oz, really, Shawshank.
This would be before even Shawshank. This is 92. So I mean, I can't think of anything before it. So this really kickstarted the whole prison.
This might have been the start of like the 90s fetish with prisons.
Yeah. So. And honestly, I think it's more worth watching than Oz, because like that's like 6 seasons, which I never got through.
I didn't get through it either.
It's just bleak as hell. There's I don't see any light at the end of that tunnel. So it's like, if you're gonna put yourself through, like American Me, at least sort of has something to say, and it's 2 hours as opposed to fucking 60 hours of just the bleakest nonstop butt rape and shankings. God. So yeah, I'd watch American Me. You're gonna get the gist of it, maybe even a little more substance content wise. So
and then soon after that, there was another killing that was done in kind of like this, they were watching a cartoon, and I believe that's a killing that they made Little Puppet do, right? Who's this
Little Puppet
kid.
is just a gang name they gave a member of the Mexican mafia's little brother who went into prison for the first time.
Well, I think the Big Brother's puppet, right? I mean,
the Big Brother's puppet.
Yeah, and like to initiate him, make sure he's on the up and up, they make him do like this killing, and
the more he doesn't want to do it, clearly, the more it's like you're the dude to do it,
Mm-hmm.
So. And it's kind of sad too, because it's like one of the only innocent scenes in the movie where they're like laughing to Looney Tunes, and you just
maybe that's one of the more visually interesting scenes.
Yeah, well, the only bright colors we've seen in the whole bloody movie, for one thing, because it's a cartoon playing on screen, and this way he's laughing along to these cartoons, which kind of plants the idea that maybe this guy is also just a kid. He's never had a chance to actually be, you know, anything other than a hard ass or whatever. But you know,
like he could literally just sit the fuck down and watch a cartoon,
right?
But the world around him is, you know, puts his life in a different direction. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it's just, and it's tragic, basically.
I mean, we definitely see that with Santana later on. So I'm thinking this is almost like a precursor to that, you know, where that idea that, you know, this is another guy who's maybe just a kid, really, you know, so in a way, a murderer and a kid, you know, so it's really complicated, but.
He was one of those characters that you kind of wished he like stayed out of it. At least I did. Because I felt like the darkness of like, he's doing it. And the second his older brother kind of rejects the idea, they kind of do that sharp tone of like, he's fucking doing it.
Yeah, it solidifies it. Yeah. So
it's like, and it's like they're thinking back to the dude who got shanked. He denied it. He denied like an order or whatever. And now like no one wants to like fuck that over again, because like, you know, the second like they retaliate against it, they're gonna get shanked. They're gonna get killed. So
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and you get the affirmation that, oh no, yeah, it's okay, it's all good, you know, it's very much not all good, but
and again, the pressure that these, you know, kids go through at such a young age to get into that lifestyle is so obvious, and it's made even more obvious of what Dakota and I learned from like reading about the movie, that just consultants on the movie decades after the events of the movie got killed.
Decades? I thought that all happened at that. Oh, so we're still okay. Right.
I think someone got people. A couple people got killed like right after the release of the film.
Well, yeah, I thought it all kind of happened around that time, but
I'd imagine this story ends around the 80s, though. I would think.
And this
sounds about right. And like the timeline of the movie.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Montoya learns that his mother died. So that's a pretty sad scene. Like his brother gives him the news, and then Montoya gets out. Like there was probably some decent time gap there, but basically Montoya gets out. JD's driving him through. He's like, we can still control the inside, and when you control the inside, you control the outside.
Yeah, I'm horrible with math. I'm trying to think of like how old he is. He's like probably mid-30s, late 30s, maybe.
He did like 20. He did 10 to 25. He probably did all the 25, I would imagine.
So he's in his 40s.
He's probably like 43 or something like that. Yeah, he's an old ass dude.
At least 41, like 40 or 41 at the youngest. He meets up with his father and brother. That's a nice scene. And he meets Julie, who becomes his girlfriend, and we figure out is the voiceover from the beginning of the movie.
Which, by the way, she is cousins with Puppet and Little Puppet.
Right, that's important. And probably my favorite, or the most innocent scene, so probably the most pleasant scene in the movie, is she teaches him how to dance. And because he had never danced before,
we hear that in the opening, I guess monologue or whatever, you know, we hear her narration. She's like, you know, I mean, the man I fell in love with was the one who doesn't know how to dance, who doesn't know how to make. I mean, which is kind of establishing that idea that he's not even had a chance to live in the world, you know. So, and then that, you know, what was established there, you know, obviously comes to she teaches them how to dance, and so we. Right there, I think, is our first indication that this is obviously the woman from those opening letters. Yeah, it's weird to see him so disarmed, somebody so completely brutal, and you know, he doesn't know how to act around her or how to talk around her. And he's, you know, I mean, it's just, it is a weird juxtaposition, but anyway, but yeah, it is one of those only innocent, warm moments in the whole film. I'm probably jumping ahead a bit, but I think one of the things that the movie does pretty well is it acknowledges, I think even the character acknowledges it, that it's not enough to redeem him, you know. It's because some things can go over the top, but it explores that idea that something else could have been, and had things not gone the way they did.
And the funny thing is too, is they juxtapose the dance with Julie and then the next date with Julie where like she teaches him how to drive. They go to the beach. He's never seen the beach. And like right in between that, they talk about this, or they have this scene where they meet this boss on the outside who I don't remember the name, but he has an affiliation with the mafia and his son is in Folsom.
Oh yeah.
An Italian
Italian.
dude.
Yeah.
It was Italian. Okay.
So that came up earlier. Like we go through kind of almost like a King of New York, which actually probably would have came out at the same time. But at the start of that was Abel Ferrara who did like Bad Lieutenant. But at the start of that, we have Christopher Walken just getting out of prison, and he's driving around New York to see what's changed. You know, he's like surveying the land. So we get a very similar. I think that actually came out after American Me. So this would have been the start of it. But he's just kind of touring. He's like, not much has really changed, you know, from what he remembers as a kid. But you know, it's different, but it's the same. But one of the things is that, yeah, the mafia, it comes up that the mafia, they're observing, you know, physically from the car that they're running the show, but they're running it sloppily. And so like the idea is that, okay, this is our chance to move in because they've gotten too comfortable. And, you know, so this is our chance to assert ourselves. And that's, yeah, that comes up I during the scene you were talking about that,
Right.
you know, he makes his move. So.
And one of the things that they mentioned that the Italian boss mentions to them is like, my son's in Folsom. Don't make his life more miserable than it is already. Which
Regret it, yeah.
Yeah, which doesn't end up happening for the kid.
It feels, yeah, he's so ignorant. It's just horrible to watch that fucking scene.
Oh.
You know, nervous talking about, but yeah, where it's contrasted with. I watch it. I saw on Netflix. They use the MPAA ratings or descriptions where possible. You know, so unless it's made for TV or something. I saw strong violence and strong sensuality. I'm like, that's not. What the fuck are you talking? So like, her breasts are covered by her hair and stuff, and like the whole scene with Egio is sensual, I guess. Well, it escalates a bit, but then there's like straight up butt rape, like fucking going between those two scenes, which is just horrible. I don't think I've ever seen a scene like that. But yeah, but it's like playing almost like it wouldn't have felt out of place, at least early on in like an 80s action movie, as like a montage love scene. You know, they're playing the guitar riffs and all that. Like it's, yeah, and then contrasted with butt humpery. It's like, oh God.
And it's supposed like you would think that like, oh, this is supposed to be like the best part, like the most you know,
humanizing or something.
Humanizing, redeeming part of this guy's story. But like the audience is interjected with some like butt rape murder.
It, you know, as much as the rape itself was bad, like the camera angle of his face against the rice, it made you feel like Jesus Christ, like I had to look away, like
yeah.
But
it's a difficult scene.
But and worse is that he trusted all these people. They're all his friends.
They're drinking with him.
Yeah, they're talking about boxing or something like that.
And the Asian dude, after he gets raped, pulls out a knife and then jabs it in.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I mean, you see in all these mafia movies, the Italian mafia movies, where it's like everybody pretends to be your friend and they get popped in the back of the head. Well, in this one, you get popped in the ass, and then so it's bad.
And and like it's, you know, not even the sex scene with Julie is even that's a little fucked up because like he clearly kind of has some kind of flashback PTSD of when he got raped and.
I don't. That's the other thing.
Starts trying it from that way, and she doesn't want it, and it's just it's like awkward.
Up, and he's like almost trying to
fucks up the evening.
Yeah,
like I don't know.
It's fucking messy. Yeah, it's messed up.
To tie it all up, like, you know, he's never really been around women his entire life, and he's like 43 now.
Yeah.
You know, like he probably, if he's had relations, it hasn't been a normal one. You know, if in any sense of the imagination, because, you know, it's prison. You know what I mean? Like it can get weird if you put a man through there and he's 43 before he like meets a woman to talk to for the first time.
Yeah. And one of the next scenes is like a bunch of their drugs is like bad, like uncut shit, I believe. And Julie's, was it her son or little brother? I think it was her son, right?
Little brother.
Little brother. Okay. And Julie's little brother overdoses on it. So, I mean, like, he's even hurting the people he loves on the outside now.
Oh, well, yeah, well, the key thing there is that, like, I mean, so yeah, we learn very shortly after that the Italians were distributing basically uncut stuff, I'm assuming, that anybody would OD on, but they weren't distributing it anywhere else but in these, like Mexican kind of areas of the city. So just to kill as many as possible. So, yeah, and so very directly, obviously the kid had a choice not to do those drugs. We see earlier on where he's trying to warn the kids off of drugs. He doesn't use any of them himself. So it is still the kid's decision, but beyond that, he's pretty directly responsible for, that situation, so because it's the Italian guy's retribution for what they did to his son. We get that whole like Godfather, he's in the pool, he's like, no, like the horse head thing. But yeah, I don't know to what degree the woman's ever aware of this. I mean, obviously she's, her cousin is Puppet and Little Puppet, but she knows enough to know that he at least deals in drugs. And so indirectly, she still is like, you're the problem, later as the movie goes on. But he's very directly tied to what happened to her little brother. So.
And soon after this, Montoya and his father visit the mother's grave. And that's when, as you explained earlier, that's when the father explains that, like, of the night of his mother's rape and how he was never certain if he was his kid or not. And that's kind of why, like, I suppose he wasn't the worst movie father that even we've talked about, Dakota, but that's why, like, that's why he, like, never really felt like he was his, and, was always, like, I suppose, never really a super loving father.
Yeah, he's just more absent than anything. It's distant, and yeah, it's just everything just piles up, especially towards the end of the film, where just like he learns that about him. So it just, it's bleak and unrelenting and depressing as hell. So
yeah, and then this is when the Black Guerrilla family raids the Mexican mafia's sort of den, and basically forces, it's really fucked up, like forces their heads into all the shit and makes them breathe until they pass out and die.
Forces them to overdose on the coke that they're distributing and shit.
Right. Yep. And then that's when Montoya asks JD, because this is when, like, he finesses, like, Aryan Brotherhood support, because the Aryan Brotherhood obviously doesn't like Black Guerrilla family. So JD and Montoya get the Aryan Brotherhood to take out, like, shoot up a like a nightclub where they hang out. And but Montoya maintains that it's not about race, that it's about, respect and the gangs. At that point, it kind of, those lines kind of blur, and it kind of, you know what I mean? What do you think about that scene, Jorge?
I think it's a point where Montoya is showing a little weakness to the Mexican mafia, because he's starting to think about things as an outsider now. He's starting to see, like, oh shit, what we're doing is fucked up. It's not going to solve anything. Mm-hmm. And JD, who's still ingrained deep into, like, that way of thinking, he's like, I think at some point he's like, what's wrong with you? He's like, at the moment we should be the strongest. You're showing weakness. Like, that girl's gone to your head. And JD gets pissed off that Montoya doesn't like that continuous cycle of, like, violence, double the violence. Don't fuck with us. Like, whenever someone does something to them, they got to do something like 10 times worse to, like, them, like back and forth kind of shit.
What was his fucking name? Like, what's your name? Arthur J or some shit. He's like, no, it's Mrs. J. I'm like, fucking fucking shits the dude's dick off. Look at that.
Oh fuck.
That was,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was pretty brutal as far as retaliations go. No fucking about there. So
Little puppet gets married, and it's like the best day of his life, like just like he's always imagined it, yada yada yada, like really building up the happiness for this character.
yeah, you know when that happens.
When things are too good, it goes the other way.
Little puppet starts talking shit about the gang on his wedding day because he starts talking shit because he's a tattoo artist and he cut his tendons on his hand when he tried killing that dude.
So now he can't do it as well.
So now he can't draw as well, and he's like, all because of the fucking gang. It didn't do anything good for me, and blah 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 blah.
Like, shut up. That's what they're saying to him.
And Montoya's there, but he's like agreeing with him. He's just kind of like, he's right. He lost everything by doing that. He gained nothing essentially, and like he stays quiet during his rant about how the Mexican mafia sucks.
Which, I mean, we've seen before is usually that means you're dead, right? He'll say it's all good, and then you get, but in this case, he actually means it. Like he's like, so he does forgive Little Puppet, and and you can see, well, his name's not, it's just Puppet, but Big Puppet, I guess, is like a little later in the movie, where he's like, please call this off. And he's like, I will. And he's like, he doesn't believe him, right? Because he's heard that, he's like, yeah, it's all good, right? He's heard that shit before, and it ain't good. But so he's really looking for assurances there. Like, yeah, no, really, it is okay. And ultimately things aren't, because it's that kind of movie where nothing is okay. And it's just, but yeah, no, but at this point in the movie, he really is more forgiving and more, and that's, it obviously doesn't work out for him, but unfortunately, because of what he's already established, that there is like a zero tolerance policy.
On the night of the wedding, that's when we have like the in-person, you're like two people scene with Montoya and Julie.
Right.
And I believe Montoya had grabbed Lil Puppet's like coat, and his coat had drugs in it. So these cops pull up, they look through his, is that how it happened? They looked through his stuff and then found Little
Puppet's puking all over. They get him back to his place. He runs inside, but he leaves his coat behind on like I think a grated fence or something. And it's shortly after that whole dialogue between him and her. So yeah, the cops pull up. But with that scene, as far as like the actual dialogue that happens, it's expanded upon from what we got at the very start of the film. And I don't know, it's a really intense scene. And then the cops pull up, and it kind of shows that, like, I mean, just again, the cyclical, like, it's beyond control to a certain extent, because then he ends up taking the fall for Little Puppet, and because he had a few pills in his coat pocket, and there's no point in like trying to indict Little Puppet because he'll just go with them. Then I mean, it's just, so it's almost an altruistic act, taking the fall for it, which kind of shows how much he's changed. Not that he's not a rat or anything, but it's just, there's no point in bringing Little Puppet down with him, and I mean, before, sure, you'd probably have Little Puppet killed, but it really isn't Little Puppet's fault, it's just an accident, and that's how he sees it, and there's no point in everybody going down, so he just takes the fall for it, and she sees that, that there isn't like a simple, it's just the way of things, it's not completely what he chose, so. And he says a little later on, if they're going to get you, they're going to get you, but it doesn't matter, so, but anyway, so he ends up back in prison, and that's how that goes.
Jorge, what else did you think about the whole wedding night, him getting arrested again?
I just thought it was a sign that, his character was changing, for one. It was a sign that he was letting shit slide, which is like the worst thing you could do when you were enforcing something, like, as Dakota said, with zero tolerance policy for the last 25 plus years. And now it's just showing everyone else, like, oh, he made the rule up that if you fuck up in our gang, we kill you, and now he's the one fucking up, and now the next one up, which is JD, he's making up, he's seeing this shit happen, and like at some point you start realizing like, oh damn, like the rest of these characters, they're not gonna follow Santana down this path. Like they're gonna stick to like the Mexican mafia.
Yep.
And and you feel that. I think that wedding night you feel it, because soon after he gets caught, gets sent back to prison, he's like in a happy mood almost. He's like, hey, you want some grilled cheese? He's offering grilled cheese to his inmate, and he's like,
It's
yo,
such an ominous presence that again the dude's like hesitant to even take it. I mean,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it's totally spot on. It's like it's just. But I think there's also the other element is that I think he knows what's coming for him. Towards the end of the movie, he knows that this isn't compatible. With what he's established. So I think in that final scene with him, like he's pretty resigned. He knows what's going on, but I don't. Yeah. So
and Montoya tries to convince in prison, like in the whatever you call them, with the phones and the glass, those visitors. I don't know what you call those rooms.
His visitation. I don't know. Yeah.
Probably
gonna come up in a future movie, so I guess we should learn that shit. But
yeah, that's a very common one. Montoya tries to convince JD not to go through, with basically killing off Little Puppet. I think were like JD's orders at that point.
His puppet knows his name is on the list, and so he's just assuming that it's Santana, but it actually wasn't Santana that ever put that name on the list, right? That's coming from JD. So
yeah, I believe so. And the quote I took away from this conversation came from Montoya to JD, and it's what hits home the hardest for JD is whatever we had, we gave it away. Talking about when they were young. So like, even though they have almost like a cyclical, impossible, like meat grinder of an environment to grow up in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like he still he's come to the realization that like, we didn't have much, but whatever we did have, we traded it for this life, you know what I mean? And he, at this point in his life, he sees that it's a mistake.
Yeah, so, especially in their case where it was traded in for so little. It was just, they wanted to walk down a street and feel powerful, I guess they got that wish, but it's just an absolutely massive cost, the cost of their whole lives. I mean, I guess it's so, I don't.
And you can't blame them totally because like we said, it is like this meat grinder where like
you gotta do shit to survive.
Yeah, it's a very very difficult problem to solve, if not almost impossible. I don't know.
I was watching like this documentary. It's just the most depressing shit. Well, I think they brought up that kid from New York who just like stole a backpack or something. I don't, he was like 18 or something, and did like 3.5 years, and then just whatever the hell happened at the end of it, he killed himself. Like he wasn't looking for money or anything when he sued the state, or I don't think he even went to try. I can't remember, but but it's somewhere else in that documentary. It was like the story of this guy, again, I think it was like a petty theft thing. And as soon as he gets into jail, he's a young kid, and like this guy's like, here's how it works. You kill somebody for me or I fucking kill you. And he was in there for petty theft. He goes up to murder, for killing this guy that's gonna, saying he's gonna fucking kill him. And so it's like but he wasn't taking that chance. He's like, well, fuck this then. And yeah, so you can see the immediate escalation that it just traps you in this. It's certainly not reformative. It's there's another thing that came up in that movie Scum I was talking about, but yeah, just it is a shame that that's an understatement. I don't know it. Yeah, I don't even know what I was gonna say. It's just it's depressing as hell. So
super depressing.
Yeah.
And then speaking of depressing, like the last 5 minutes of this film, Puppet is driving along with Little Puppet, and asks him or gets him to pull over, and basically Puppet knows that if whoever, if he's out there protecting his little brother, like Puppet's gonna die too.
Yeah, I mean,
So
because little Puppet got out before him, and then he was a few weeks
Mhm.
later, and so while he's in prison, he knew that like there was this hit out on little Puppet, and that became that he's got to be the one to do it to prove himself. Yeah, and now little Puppet's got a wife. He's not just going to pack up and leave with his brother.
Yeah.
And it's this horrible situation where it's family having to. He gets Fredo basically, and
Yep.
it's so. But not in the same, like, yeah, it's family turning on itself. And so this whole idea that I think was established at the start, it's not necessarily brought up through the film, but the idea is that this is your family. Well, it's like, what kind of family eats itself like this, I
Mhm.
mean, and, just so that you can survive. And he has to kill his own bloody brother, I mean, just to stay alive. And so it's like, that doesn't seem like much of a family, I mean,
It's fucked up.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and Puppet, how he does it is he strangles him with a rope. What did you think about the last 10 or 5 or 10 minutes, Jorge, going into the very last scene?
Happy fun times.
Well, besides Puppet murdering his own brother, it just shows you like how much the violence has escalated. It got to that point in
Mhm.
time where like you're sent to do a hit on your own blood brother, and that is a eerie feeling when you saw that. Like, it's like, god damn, like what amount of pressure was this dude facing that he chose the Mexican mafia over his brother's life, which is insane to think about. Like,
Well, yeah. Right, it's such an uncomfortable place to explore. I mean, where it's like, because they're both dead otherwise. So I mean, it's
Right.
literally he has to do this, or they're both dead. It's like, I mean, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
and then
Nobody wants to think about that shit.
and then Montoya in the scene after is killed by, in many respects, like not his blood
Yeah.
brother, but Mundo.
Right, his own
Like-
family, which is kind of the idea that like it's just
thrown off a ledge, and that's actually the one specific, like, of him falling down. That's like the one thing that I've seen before of this movie, because it used to be in those like Universal Pictures like highlight reels that they would have.
oh, they use
Mhm.
that. That's a dead
Yeah.
giveaway.
It's literally a dead giveaway.
Yeah,
Whose
But-
idea was that? Damn it.
but
And then the very last scene we have is like Montoya's actual brother inducts this little kid. I think he might have been
Julie's
Relate-
son.
Yeah, I thought he was related to that family.
Yep.
Yeah. Inducts Julie's son into the gang just to commit a drive-by, and he's like, who should I shoot at? Doesn't matter.
yeah, we
Like,
see,
just-
just the family in the front. Yeah, and it could be any one of them. But yeah, I mean, he got his little brother he brought his little brother into it. Now his little brother's bringing somebody else into it. It just, and we see just how doomed it is, because we see the brother against brother thing, literally. I mean, not just the idea of like, you're a gang brother, but like familial, literal brothers killing each other in this. It's so cannibalistic and cyclical and hopeless that it just, I mean, that's the note that the movie ends on. So it's like,
Yep, cut to
like-
black. Yeah, that it almost like reminds me somewhat of it. Well, okay, that would be a major spoiler, but I suppose like we don't do TV, but like reminds me of a scene in The Wire, if
Oh.
anybody has seen that.
I never got through The Wire. I know I gotta,
So we usually now talk about like its impact on society. I feel like we've brought that up quite a bit based on the fact that consultants got murdered.
yeah,
But how accurate would I think it's a pretty truthful depiction of what that story is, like it does. It's brutally honest. Like there are no heroes. Like the closest thing to like a pure character would be Julie, but even her son gets into the gang.
And if we notice, Julie goes her and Montoya were talking on the beach about going to school and bettering themselves.
Oh,
But it was ironic because Montoya was still deep into the gang.
Mhm.
And then the last scene was Julie actually going to school, I think, to better herself. And before she left, she grabbed a makeup brush and covered the tattoo of the gang on her hand.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
but she's probably gonna fall back because now her kid's wrapped up in this shit. Now, I mean, her brother's dead, her kid's it's like it's pretty hopeless, but yeah, it's almost more disheartening that people are trying by the end of that film, and they're you
yeah.
see what an uphill bloody battle that's going to be. But yeah, I don't know about like the authenticity of it historically, but I mean, it doesn't seem to pull any punches. It doesn't seem to be trying to spare any characters or anything like that. It's very in your face, and so in that way, I mean, it feels honest to me. I again, I don't know the history, but
I think it was accurate up until the part where Montoya, who's depicting the leader, gets shanked like 1,000 times by all these gang members. Like, I think that was the only part that pissed off people and that got people murdered in real life.
I thought it was the rape stuff, because it was like they didn't want it's not the most masculine thing, but pumpery or whatever. So like that got people in trouble, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, also seeing the leader probably get shanked, that's probably it might have just been a hugely controversial movie for reasons I don't even understand.
Yeah.
So
I'd have to look more into it.
And based on the entire movie, the whole entire movie is how like striving for like that respect can like just lead you just down a shithole, basically. So just maybe on its merits.
Like, I mean, when you think about where the movie starts, they just wanted to walk down a fucking road that wasn't theirs, And I mean, it just blew up into the rest of the movie. So, yeah. So,
and so Jorge, do you have anything else to say about the movie before we get into recommendations and then ratings?
I don't think so. You guys
right.
covered a lot of it. You guys had good attention to detail in the whole thing, and I could tell the research you guys did. I think I did that research too when I first watched it.
It was completely minimalistic. I after I saw that, I just got scared off. I'm like, okay, I don't want to read into this anymore. Fucking people got slaughtered. Okay. And I saw like, okay, 3 other people have done this on YouTube, so we're
number 4.
And they don't have any more. They don't have any more posts in a while. So.
yeah. Probably look into that. Yeah, no, it sounds like you did more of the historical research. Yeah, because I just like, oh, okay, so that's what we're getting into. But
all right, so recommendations. I'd recommend I'd recommend Goodfellas, because it's a crime family, that kind of deal.
Well, again, and people that you consider your family ultimately popping you in the back of the head,
Yeah.
So like.
Any recommendations for you, Jorge?
I'd say Scarface. This movie is like in the category of Scarface, like to the point where it's like, dude has nothing, gets thrown into this life, and it ends up really shitty.
Yeah, but it's sort of empire building in a way. I mean, so yeah. It's the other thing.
And then Dakota, you had a recommendation earlier. I forgot what it was though.
Oh yeah, if you want to watch a horrible juvie film, there are 2 versions. There's the original BBC version, and then there's the, I think, Channel 4 version. That's the one I watched. Ray Winstone, I think, is the first movie he's ever in, called Scum. Horribly, yeah. It checks all these boxes, rape, murder. Yeah, it's really not till the last half hour, so it really throws you off in that way. But there you go. That was in the late 70s, 77, 78. But other than that, Oz, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you just want to see more Ejo, I mean, well, Blade Runner, I think, was most people's introduction. But then in the sci-fi space, Battlestar Galactica is a fucking masterpiece. I mean, yeah, but he's in every episode of that series, and he's just fucking amazing in Battlestar. I'm really glad I gave it a chance. It's one of those shows I didn't like at first. I sat through the miniseries introduction, and I didn't dig it, but people just kept talking about it. And I decided to continue, and just I always talk about my favorite movies, top 5. but Battlestar is top 5 as far as TV shows go. So just for the I love Battlestar Galactica.
I've watched and rewatched the like you said, like the miniseries pilot movie or whatever it is. It's like a feature film length. I've watched it like twice, but just never bridged it to the next episodes.
Yeah, you just have to dive in. You have to stick with it, because I didn't like any of those characters. I just thought it was kind of cheesy and ridiculous and Battlestar had complex moral decisions and everything, but I didn't dig the characters, and they're hybridizing some of the cheesier elements from the original show with really fucked up modern moral quandaries. It just didn't work. It didn't mesh, but I kept going, and I'm so glad that I did. But the other thing I would obviously, the closest that I can think of, if anything, I'd recommend would be American History X, which came also, I would almost expect owes a lot to this movie because it's so similar. When you think about the brother getting the other brother killed, and there's a lot that those movies have in common.
How like the site, I suppose American History X definitely brings up more of the race issues.
But just the cyclical nature of so
like the feudal, like just posturing and respect for respect's sake and that kind of thing. All right, let's get into the ratings. Jorge, out of 5 stars, you can do half stars too.
Okay.
How many stars will you give American Me?
I would give it a 3.5.
3.5?
Yep.
Okay. I was actually thinking 3.5 or 4.
So was that? Yeah, that's where I'm at, because it's so depressing. Most people, that's a barrier to entry. Most people are going to sit through this thing.
Yeah, I mean, like we're cinephiles here, but even it's not the easiest movie to rewatch. It definitely impacts you. I'll ride with 3.5. Yeah.
I guess I'll just break up I'll break it up by saying 4, but I was thinking 3.5 to 4 myself. So I'll go up to 4.
If we can get into detail, I was thinking 3.8.
Okay.
Oh shit, 3.81.
High end. Yeah.
The only I suppose discounts I'm giving it are things that are kind of out of its control though. So it's not so much because my favorite parts of the movie are when they're on the outside, you know what I mean, and able to flesh out the characters a little better. And
I mean, it's a relief. It becomes a different movie for a very brief moment,
that's definitely
why you're drawn to it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So there's and it's a 3.5, but if you're talking about a very difficult biopic that you want to remain true and honest, and it's really violent, but it's violent in an honest way of how things happen in those situations.
Yeah, I guess just imagine what episode of Breaking Bad was it where it's start all over again, they're shaking people and setting them on fire, it's like that for 2 hours, so
yeah.
But,
yeah, so it's just not a warm fuzzy movie.
No. So that's why I mean, a lot of people probably couldn't sit through it. It is not a happy, but if you have a high threshold, there is substance to it. It does have something to say, but it is not a pleasant watch. It's not enjoyable,
and it does achieve its main theme.
Yeah,
it does achieve its main theme throughout the movie. It doesn't lose that. So It's definitely a really good movie. I'd recommend it if you have strong stomach. Jorge, why don't you give the people your info again, the stuff you're doing, the single you got out, and then we'll sign it off.
All right, for sure. So I'd like to say thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
It was dope. Fucking talking about a movie at length. It's actually my first time talking about a singular movie to people for over an hour, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, you can find me at theboyj.com. That's THEBOYJ.com. I recently released a new single called Self Care. It's available everywhere you listen to music. Self Care, The Boy J. I also do a podcast that comes out on Tuesdays. It's called the Drop Off Podcast. That's also available everywhere. And on the podcast, I didn't explain earlier in the show, but I pretty much just talk to people about random shit. So if you guys want to check that out, I talk to some pretty interesting people. That's also on my website.
So, I mean, Nathan brought it up. It's not just a movie thing. It's just anything.
It's way
It's
more
anything.
free form. Yeah,
Okay.
we're we have our theme, Dakota, and we go down our path.
He's like a master of all trades. It's just.
But yeah, that's
okay.
yeah. He'll just
Let's talk about anything. Yeah.
anything with anyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Spoiler Alert podcast. It has been fun, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.